We have all been anxiously awaiting a breakthrough in the development of a vaccine for the coronavirus. But what if we told you you could be a part of the solution? More trials are coming to Alabama. Our Sydney Stallworth tells us what you need to know about these vaccine trials before signing on the dotted line and how you can get involved.
Operation Warp Speed is bringing COVID-19 vaccine trials right here to Huntsville and a number of other cities in Alabama.
We select clinical trial places because people may get sick, and so we're trying to predict or understand where we think this COVID-19 outbreak will continue.
Operation Warp Speed is taking volunteers in Huntsville, Mobile, Birmingham, Tyler, and Athens. We're told over 60,000 people have already signed up to receive injections nationwide. Some people participating in the study will receive an actual vaccine, while others will get a placebo injection.
A lot of people say, I don't want to take the risk. Other people say, I just don't have time. But in my mind, if you're looking for a way to have an impact on this pandemic, really serving as a volunteer is tremendously helpful.
The goal is to get an effective vaccine out quickly, but safety comes first, and they say a diverse group of volunteers is needed to get it done.
If there are populations that have high rates of infection, we really want to make sure our vaccine protects those populations too.
People who are considered high risk are in high demand.
We need the elderly people to participate, again, as volunteers in our clinical trial.
Dr. Hepburn says clinical trials will be a part of our reality for years, even after an effective vaccine is approved.
One of the big questions with vaccines is going to be how long does that protection last? We remember we get a influenza vaccination every year.
Operation Warp Speed is aiming to deliver vaccines by early next year. For more on how you can get involved with these trials, head on over to RocketCityNow.com. Pitting the Valley first, I'm Sydney Stallworth, WZDX News.